Hi, I'm Gene Marrano. Our guests today have common goals, making the Roanoke Valley a more interesting place to live, work, and play. One has made the redevelopment of downtown Roanoke properties and promotion of the arts a priority, while the other is the face of the growing Roanoke Valley Greenway system. Our guests are Ed Walker and Liz Belcher. Ed Walker calls himself a social entrepreneur, someone who sees redevelopment projects as a way to strengthen at-risk suburban settings. The best way to do that, says Walker, is by combining elements of arts and culture, education and knowledge, social entrepreneurship and investment, along with key aspects of local government and citizenship. A graduate of Washington and Lee Law School, Walker also attended St. Andrews University in Scotland and the University of North Carolina. He's best known now perhaps as the developer of urban residential projects in downtown Roanoke, reviving old structures like the former home of Grand Piano, the Cotton Mill, and the Patrick Henry Hotel makeover now in progress. Walker also founded the Downtown Music Lab and the Marrano Donor Center of the Virginias. He opened Kirk Avenue Music Hall several years ago, redeveloped what is now Fork in the City, and is a driving force behind CityWorks, which he terms a social entrepreneurship entity. Above all, one might say that Ed Walker appears to be bullish on where Roanoke is headed. Ed Walker, welcome to the interview.
Thank you, glad to be here.
In some of the literature on the website, you call yourself a social entrepreneur. What does that mean in a nutshell?
I think a social entrepreneur generally is somebody who's interested in finding how commercial principles can be used, certainly to make a reasonable rate of return, but also to have some sort of positive social impact as well. So it's trying to use commercial principles to, in my case, trying to make urban areas sort of stronger from the inside out. And generally what you're trying to do is to convert a weakness into a strength.
Right.
I mean, that's sort of the fun of it and the challenge. Can you take something that is generally thought to be unworthy or worthless or too far gone and to somehow figure out a creative structure to convert that weakness to a strength.
Obviously, you're well known these days for taking older properties in Roanoke and through your companies and turning them into something positive. But I mean, and of course, you want to make money on it. But of course, does that really enter into your thinking, Ed, that you really want to do this for the good of the valley, or that this would be a good thing for Roanoke?
I think it has to. I mean, I learned early on that the income and expense part of it, the disciplined business thinking, is absolutely critical, because if you lose touch with that, you will quickly lose your ability to continue to have an impact. You can't be sort of fuzzy-headed about the economics of it for very long. And there's an objective to sort of have an exponential impact as opposed to an incremental impact. I mean, it's one thing if I go out and you fix up one building and then you move on, you fix up another one. But the real goal is to try to figure out structures that are more exponential, where, for example, you teach 10 people in the community how to use the real estate skill set so that they can go out and do projects. That's really where most of my interest is these days. Probably 75% of my time is spent on pure social entrepreneurship projects, and the other 25%, on more traditional business projects.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. I was going to ask you later, but I'll ask you now.
Sure.
Are you hoping that other young professionals, other people in the Roanoke area, will kind of follow what you're doing, or and some of them are already doing that? Maybe look at a property and say, hey, whether it's downtown or in Grandin Village or Northwest, whatever, and say, hey, I can make some money on this, but this would be a good project for the area, and kind of pick up the ball.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I certainly don't pretend to be anything remarkable sort of in the constellation of people doing things, and I'm not expecting anybody to follow me or to emulate me, but I think that the idea of using one's aptitude and interests in a way that provides a living for them and also has a community impact is a great thing. And it's absolutely no question that I want to support and encourage anybody doing that. The community's made a lot of progress in the last 60 months. It's become a much more interesting place, a much more dynamic place. and that needs to continue happening, but it needs to happen in other parts of the city too. I mean, I don't think we will have succeeded very much until we get some urban redevelopment going in Northwest, whether it's 11th Street or Melrose. Those are very interesting neighborhoods to me. Southeast is very interesting to me. And basically the city was bisected by the railroad tracks, of course. That's obvious enough and a difficult thing to bridge, but we have to make an affirmative, assertive effort to do that. But it was also bisected by 581, and Southeast has struggled for a long time. And so I'd love to see, I certainly don't want to do and can't do every project. What I'd really rather see are 25 more people, interested. I'd like to see more African Americans involved, more Latinos involved. I'd just see more of everybody.
How much would it help if the real estate market would pick up, or would make it more attractive to some people?
Well, I don't know. I mean, every time,
or is this the time to really get involved?
It's a great time. I mean, when I started, it was really, it was 10 years ago. It was 2000. It was a terrible, maybe not an equally terrible time because the banking situation wasn't quite so bad, but it was a bad time for real estate, and it's a bad time now. So I think that part of it is just sort of jumping in.
A lot of people probably don't know this, but you practiced law, you were an attorney, and you come from a whole lineage of attorneys. Right. And just talk about that a little bit. You don't practice anymore.
No, I grew up as sort of a third generation lawyer. So many of the people that I admired the most were attorneys. I really got to see firsthand from my dad and my grandfather and their colleagues that law was a great way to make a living in an interesting way and also serve the community. And I've always felt like the bench and the bar really lead public service, in so many ways. And so I'm never very far from the sort of lawyer in my DNA. And I learned a lot from the Virginia Bar Association. They do amazing numbers of community service projects. And so that is an important thing. And so everybody around the table growing up was a lawyer, and I definitely wanted to be a part of that club. And I enjoyed practicing the law when I did. I don't think I was I wasn't as natural a fit as some of the great lawyers in Roanoke, like Frank Rogers, for example, because I think some of my aptitudes and the tendency to want to create are, the practicing law can tend to be a little more rigid. But I am very grateful for my legal education at W&L, which was a premier part of my educational life at Washington and Lee. And so, yeah, I'm never very far from that touchstone.
You also were at Tar Heel, and then you spent part of your college years in Scotland. Talk about that.
I did.
How did
my
that
first
open your
year
eyes?
of college, I was 17 when I graduated from high school, and I wasn't ready to go to undergrad, and I wanted to do something a little bit different. And my parents always encouraged us to travel, and University of St. Andrews was taking direct applications, and so I spent that first year in St. Andrews, and I learned that the winter on the North Sea is cold and windy, but I loved it. It was great, and I came back. One of the big things I learned from Scotland was how little I knew about Virginia, much less the United States. So I focused on the U.S. for about 10 years after that.
Right.
I didn't really start traveling internationally until, probably 10 years ago.
Right. Okay. We're going to take a quick break. Our guest is Ed Walker. This is The Interview. We'll be right back.